So basically, last year, some of you were there, and we had an evening session with Esther Perel, where we had a bunch of couples come up and talk about, very candidly, about their relationships. And one couple was Abby and Glennon. And Abby's already been a part of our family. We love her. It's like bear hug. I love how you all cheered when she came up on the screen. I mean, Abby has been a part of the Maker's journey for a long time. And then there was this little Glennon who got on stage. And I can say little because I am too. And she stole our hearts. She was candid and real, and we said, she really needs to be a part of this Maker's family too. And she is a superstar. This woman has written a New York Times bestseller, Love Warrior. Yes? No big deal. Oprah's turning it into a movie. Whatever. She is a philanthropist and created Together Rising. I don't know if you all know, but it's a women-led, not-for-profit. They have done grassroots fundraising. I think it's been something like, I have it written down, so I don't want to get it wrong. $16 million in 6 years with an average donation of $31. Now that's grassroots fundraising. And what they do is they're one of the most effective American organizations to mobilize responses to the Syrian refugee crisis, and she reunifies families who are separated at the U.S. border. So, and if that weren't enough, she just spent 2 years traveling across the country, hosting town halls, really about bringing red and blue states together and talking about justice and equality. So, I mean, she's got some pretty good cred. And really, what tonight is about, it's called the Maker's Family Dinner. And so we wanted someone who could come up here and welcome our Maker's family in a real and authentic way. So everybody, Glennon Doyle.
When Dylan started to talk to me about it tonight, she said, so I just really want these Makers women to come together and become family to each other. So I just want this to be like one big family dinner. And I said, okay, Dylan, I want you to think back on your last big family dinner. Are you sure? Like, don't we like these people? You know, in this era of authenticity, people are always saying to me, Glennon, I want to be real, but I can't even be real with my own family. And I say, well, shit, nobody can be real with her own family. Right? If you want to practice being real, you don't start with your family. You start with, like, the mail carrier. Right? Family is like the final frontier, you know? It's because family is where our roles are most firmly entrenched. Right? And when we're playing roles, we can't be real, right? Because we can't bring our full selves to the table. So I think what we're actually trying to do here is not create a real family, but an ideal family, right? And I think an ideal family is one in which we each can bring our full selves to the table, and we allow other people to bring their full selves to the table, knowing that each of us will be seen and valued and protected. Right? So I was born a super sensitive kid into a fiercely loving family where my role as perfect little girl was firmly entrenched so early that as I grew, it became impossible for me to bring my full self to the table. Right? It became impossible for me to bring my anger and my shame and my angst and my darkness. And so I started numbing all of that very early, and I became bulimic when I was 10 years old. And bulimia became alcoholism, and the alcohol became drugs, and I was very lost and very sick for 15 years. And then when I was 25 years old, I found myself sitting on a dirty bathroom floor, shaking from a hangover and terror and holding a positive pregnancy test. And for some reason, that was just the moment for me. And I found a phone and I called my sister from the bathroom floor and I said, okay, fine, I'm ready, just come get me, I need help. And she drove to my house and she literally picked me up off the bathroom floor, put me in her car, and drove me to my first recovery meeting. And I sat in that recovery meeting and listened to these people speak, and I thought, holy shit, these are the first honest people I have ever met in my life. Right? They spoke like nobody speaks in the real world. Right? They shared their stories. They talked about lies they'd told and relationships that they'd hurt and family secrets that they had kept inside of themselves, buried, just corroding their minds and their hearts forever. And they talked about feelings and thoughts that I thought were only my darkest feelings and thoughts. Right? And I could tell that as they pulled this stuff out of them and got it out in front of them, that it was freeing them. Right? It was like if we looked at it together. If it came from the inside out, it just all seemed more doable. And I thought, oh, this is what it looks like to bring your whole self to the table. And then the other interesting thing in those circles is that they allowed everyone else to bring their full selves to the table. And what I mean by that is very specific. In recovery circles, there are rules about how to listen. Right? So when someone brings their story, their pain, their shame, their dreams to the circle, there are rules about how to hold space for that. There is no crosstalk. There is no advice giving. There is no pity. There is no judgment. There is no dismissing. There is no rejecting. And this structure of listening is what makes people feel safe to bring their full selves, right? It's the structure that liberates. So I remember thinking, oh, what I have found in this recovery room is an ideal family, right? And after a while of coming back, I thought, why is it only possible for us to live this beautiful way 1 hour a day in these dark basements, right? Why can't I just turn the whole world into an AA meeting? And so I started to get up really early in the morning and I started to write, and I decided, okay, I'm just gonna speak, I'm gonna write in that same voice that I use in those recovery meetings. And so I started writing and writing and writing, and then people started commenting. And back then the internet was a nasty place. It's fixed now, it's fine. But back then it was rough, and so when people started to say things, I tried to teach them what I learned in recovery. I tried to teach them to hold space for different ideas, right? And to hold space for pain, and to be able to consider that two different truths can be true at the same time, right? And over time, it took 10 years, but over time it actually started working. And we became this kind of amazing, weird, quirky community of people who could hold space for each other. And then what happened is we were freeing each other, right? And we figured out that freedom is actually not a gift, it's a baton that you pass. So then we started to want to spread that freedom out, and that's how we started raising all of that money that now has raised $16 million for women and children that are marginalized all over the country. And that, right, and that all started because my sister picked me up off the bathroom floor. Right? So what I believe is that everything beautiful starts on the bathroom floor. Okay? It's my guiding principle. And that is why, they say God is in the details, but really God is in the bathroom, for sure. And what I figured out is that perspective gave me a different perspective when our country hit the bathroom floor 2 years ago, right? When Trump got elected. So my friend called me right after the election, and she said the following. She said, well, this is the fucking apocalypse. The world as we know it is over. And I remember thinking, God, I hope so. Right? Like, we need a new world. because our country has been really, really sick for a really, really long time, and it's just that most of us have been in denial about it, right? And apocalypse just means uncovering, right? So maybe now that all of this darkness and sickness that's been there forever festering has been uncovered, we can begin the real work of recovering. Okay, so now I just try to do for my community, my sweet little community, what my sister did for me. I'm just trying to pick my community up off the bathroom floor and drag them to recovery meetings, right? So we meet in churches, and we meet in schools, and we meet in big cities, and we meet in small towns, and we all gather together, and we just ask really hard questions of ourselves, right? Like, are we ready to admit that our country has become unmanageable, right? Are we willing to take an honest moral inventory? Are we willing to look at our open family secrets, which is that our country that was purported to be built upon freedom and justice was built with the genocide of Native Americans, with the kidnapping and enslaving of Africans, and the oppression of an entire gender, right? That liberty and justice for all has always only meant liberty for wealthy white men, right? And are we willing then to bring our entire family to the table, right? To bring the people of color, to bring the women, to bring the immigrants, to bring the Native Americans, to bring the queer kids. And when they come to the table, are we willing to really listen to them? Are we willing to allow them to bring their full selves, their actual experience and their pain? And are we able to listen to it deeply enough to change us, right? And then are we willing to apologize and begin the hard and very real and crucial work of making amends? And as we look at our country with sober eyes, are we willing to look at ourselves with sober eyes? Okay, I will tell you that long ago, I was sitting on a couch with my two little girls, and I was showing them pictures of a civil rights march, okay? And my younger child pointed to a white woman in the middle of this civil rights march, and her eyes lit up, and she said, "Mommy, would we have been marching with them?" And I almost opened my mouth to say, "Yes, baby, of course we would have." But my older daughter said, "Oh no, Emma, we wouldn't have been marching with them then. I mean, we're not marching with them now." And I was like, well, shit. And then a week later, I'm reading the letters from Martin Luther King Jr. for the Birmingham jail, and I read this. I must admit, I've become gravely disappointed with the white moderate. The greatest stumbling block to black freedom is not the Ku Klux Klanner. It's the white moderate who is more committed to order than to justice. And I realized, I've just been in denial about who I am in this country. Right? I imagined myself to be a white woman who would have stood with Martin Luther King Jr. because I love Martin Luther King Jr. But white people now always love Martin Luther King Jr., right? Because it is easier to love. It is easy to love a dead civil rights activist. Because he's no threat to the white supremacy that upholds us and serves us, right? It's much harder to love a live civil rights activist. And so if I want to know if I would have stood with Martin Luther King Jr. then, I don't ask myself how I feel about him now. If I want to know how I would have felt about Martin Luther King Jr. then, I ask myself things like, how do I feel about Colin Kaepernick now? Right? If I want to know how I would have felt about the freedom riders then, I don't ask myself how I feel about them now. I ask myself, how do I feel about Black Lives Matter now? Right? And if I want to know how I would have shown up in that civil rights era, I just ask myself how I'm showing up right now in this civil rights era. Okay, now that we've got through that easy stuff, I just want to share with you my favorite fact about myself, which is that 2 years ago, I left my very sweet but unfortunately unfaithful husband and married a woman. I highly recommend this course of action. Highly recommend, okay? I will share with you my second favorite fact about myself, which is that I left this marriage just weeks before, my memoir about that marriage's redemption was being launched to my very Christian audience by Oprah Winfrey. Okay, so there was literally a call with the 40 people from New York who were in charge of launching this book weeks before the launch, and they at the very end said, is there anything else? I think we're done. And I said, just one little thing. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get divorced real quick. And the other thing is that I'm in love with a woman, and actually her name's Abby Wambach. She's a little bit famous, but I feel like it's gonna be fine and nobody's gonna notice. Bye! And the panic. The panic and drama and the weeping and gnashing of teeth that ensued on that call. These people were certain, the things they said to me, they will never, your career will be ruined, right? You cannot do this, right? Your Christian audience will crucify you, which is, I understand, the Christians are always crucifying people without even noting the irony. It will be a bloodbath, they said. I remember that one. It will be a bloodbath. And I knew they were wrong. I just knew it deep in my bones that they were wrong. I knew this wouldn't ruin me because I knew the community that I had built was not the same as a lot of other communities, right? Because a lot of other communities, like our religions and our political groups and some of our companies and some of our families, are built on the idea that we all believe the same thing. We all hate the same people. Right? We will not grow, we will not change. But this community that we had built over 10 years was built on only one thing, and that was bring it all. Bring it all, and no matter how I feel about what you bring, you will be valued, and you will be honored, and you will be protected. So I announced it. You guys, there were probably 10,000 comments, and they were so freaking beautiful. Even like the harsh Christians were like, okay, love wins, I guess. And I remember a friend calling me that night and saying, oh my God, Glennon, it's like for 10 years you've been building the community that you would one day need. Right? So, I guess what I want to tell you about that is that they did a great job. They were warriors, okay? But they still have questions, and I want them to ask me their questions because I think that unasked questions become prejudices, okay? So we meet in these town halls, and recently, I'm going to end with this story. This woman stood up, and at the town hall, she raised her hand was shaking, so I made sure the microphone got to her right away. She's about 65 years old. She stood up, she had little red glasses on, and she was wearing a gray sweatshirt with a puffy paint American flag on it that said grandma underneath. So right away, I just loved her, right? And she's shaking, and she said, Glennon, I've been following you for 10 years, and I'm here to ask you a question because I don't know where else I can ask it. So it gets really quiet. And she said, I'm a grandma, and my granddaughter is now my grandson. And my niece, she took a boy to the homecoming last year, and she's taking a girl this year. And then she said, and now you're gay. And she said the following sentence. She said, I don't mean any offense. I just want you to tell me, why is everybody so gay all of a sudden? And so I said, okay, first of all, thank you for that brave question that so many people have, but nobody asks. Okay? Tell me your name. And she said, my name is Linda. And I said, okay, Linda, I'm going to tell you what my hunch is. I think it's the GMOs, Linda. I know, that's funny, right? Not in this audience. Dead quiet. I actually saw a couple women nodding and taking notes. Right? I'm imagining what they're writing, like switch the kids to organic, stat! So so I had to say, okay, wait, no, I'm just joking. I don't think it's the GMOs. Like, I can tell you what I really think, what my hunch really is, and that is that people have always forever been 50 Shades of Gay, right? Like, we have always been on this gender and sexuality, we've always been on this beautiful rainbow spectrum, right? It's just that we've just had to fit our juicy, vast selves into these arbitrary, narrow categories for so long. Until somebody just had enough and got brave enough just to bring her whole self to the table and just say, actually, that doesn't work for me. And then somebody else heard her and said, oh my God, me too. And somebody else said, me too. And they just kept raising hands until there were just like this huge army of just like freedom fighters, right? And so I said, Linda, I don't think that gayness is contagious, but I know that freedom is contagious, right? And I believe with every bone in my body that the freer each of us is, the better all of us are. And so I think the most beautiful work, I really believe that the most beautiful work we can do in our relationships, in our marriages, in our families, in our communities, and in our nation is to create circles where each person can bring all of herself to every table she's at, knowing that no matter what she brings, she will be seen, and she will be valued, and she will be protected. That's all. Thank you very much.